Appreciate that. See, now we get to celebrate that. Yeah, good morning. I'm glad. Welcome to LifePoint Crossing. My name is Ross. Welcome back to Stand Alone. We all love the idea and the ideal of the person who does not bow to pressure, who follows their own path, goes their own way, swims against the stream, even when there really is great opposition or maybe personal cost. We love the idea and the ideal, but we don't love the reality. The reality is that if we really did, then the person wouldn't be standing alone, and we're actually part of the opposition. We wish that they would shut up or change their mind or just go with the rest of us because we're the stream, right? That's just kind of inevitably the way they work. But whether or not you are really alone, and I hope you're not, I hope that's very exaggerated for this message series, but there are certainly elements of following Jesus, not everything, but there are certain elements that will have you in the distinct minority if and when we really try to follow Jesus. So we've talked about things like telling the truth, even when it costs you something, it's going to put you in the minority. We talked about sexual restraint and exclusivity, and there are certainly some situations in our society where that is not only applauded but demanded, but there are other situations where you will find yourself very much alone. We talked last week about loving people, which sounds amazing. Everyone wants to love people, but especially the people who are really a little more difficult to love. And then people might still think, well, that sounds great, but maybe for somebody else, don't really want to do that. And so today now, we're going to be looking at something that, man, and I've dropped earphones. This is just a minor disaster. Nobody actually got hurt, but definitely not how I would have planned it to go had I foresaw what was going to happen. So today we're looking at what will really buck the trend of our American individualism in maybe the greatest and most ironic way I can imagine, and of course also explicitly follows both the instructions and example of Jesus, because I can think of very little that we as a society celebrate more unanimously than being your own person. Being true to yourself. This kind of comes at the intersection of our values on freedom and independence and self-confidence and self-worth, and wherever those all kind of overlap at the center of our core American value system Venn diagram. And this is the most important thing, is to be who you are and to be you. And I actually read an article about how to be yourself, which I thought was hilarious, that I had to read an article where somebody else told me how to be me. That's just very funny to start with, but the things it said made basic sense. It started with, number one, was identify your values. It said to understand what's truly important to you. It makes sense. How are you going to be yourself if you don't even really know what is important to you? But what if what's important to you is really less you and more what's important to somebody else? I don't know. I think there's a way to make that work, but it also seems like there could be a little conflict there. And then number two was maybe even more confusing. It said, let go of others' opinions. It said, focus on what makes you happy, not pleasing others. But what if pleasing others is what makes me happy? It just told me not to do that. And so now if I do what it tells me to do, then I'm not going to be happy. But if I do what it tells me to do, I'm not going to be happy. And it's all working against each other. And now I kind of feel like it's the big ball of Christmas lights that you're going to pull out in a couple months. And you don't even know which end to start with to untangle it. And it's all really confusing. Because here is what, in our world, some people may admire or applaud, but very few are going to take meaningful steps to actualize, is living your life not for yourself, but in service of others, right? To live your life with other people in mind before yourself, to voluntarily take a position and a posture of servanthood rather than self-promotion. Now that would really be swimming against the stream, wouldn't it? That would really be going against the flow. And guess who? You have some good context clues, specifically that we're here in church, but guess who blazes their own trail in that direction? If you guess Jesus, that is always a solid guess, at least here at Life Point Crossing. So here from John 13 is where we're going to be starting today. And this will be most of the message, very well known and kind of amazing passage, maybe should be even more talked about than it is. And it's talked about quite a fair amount. But it says, Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything and that he had come from God and would return to God. This is interesting because there's going to be sort of a stimulus response here. It's not exactly like a cause and effect, but a one thing and then it leads to another. And so this is like the stimulus. This is Jesus knows who he is, and it's good. He has authority directly from God the Father. He is at the top. What are you going to do there with that being at the top? What most people would do is nothing. You're at the top. You just stay there. What's Jesus going to do? Well, you might guess something different, of course, because it says so, right? This is the next verse. So since Jesus knows he has authority from God, so here's what he does is he got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. What's he doing? He's making Play-Doh? No, of course not. It says, then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around him. You probably know that foot washing in that society is exactly what it sounds like. It was the absolute lowest rung task that anybody could do. I don't even know what I would correlate it to in our society, and if I did, I don't know if I would say it because I would be afraid it would be denigrating to whoever was in that kind of position. But this is exactly the thing that nobody would want to do. The only reason you do this is if you have no other choice. And so Jesus, who has authority from God and can literally do anything, here's what he does with his choice, is what literally nobody would choose. And then we're going to skip a couple verses. There's an exchange between he and Peter that's really kind of funny and typical of the two of them. And then he does, in fact, wash all of the disciples' feet, including Judas, who is still there, and Jesus knows fully well, is literally hours at most from specifically and personally betraying him, right? He washes all of their feet. And then in his infinite wisdom and realizing how over the last 3 years, the disciples have misunderstood probably 80, maybe 90% of everything that he said, and that there's going to be no further chance to debrief after this, right? Because this is, like most of, especially the Gospel of John, there's an enormous amount that's packed into the last few chapters. So if you're looking, you're like, well, it's chapter 13. It's right in the middle. Nah, this is at the end chronologically, though. After they're done here, he's going to go, he's going to pray, he's going to be arrested, he's going to be executed. If they don't get this right, there is no chance to go back and look over your answers. So he's going to say, all right, let's make sure we really understand this. And I kind of think this is just hilarious the way John records this so that we understand and how Jesus made sure they understand, okay? Because he says, after washing their feet, he put on his robe again, and he sat down and asked, do you understand what I was doing? I don't actually think he said it like that, but in my head he did because it's funny. And so the disciples were like, okay, well, I think so. But we have misunderstood a whole lot. So can you please just tell us? Like, no parables? Will you just tell us? And so he continues and he says, well, you call me teacher and Lord, and you're right because that's what I am. Okay, I follow. Right? And so since I, again, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. Okay, so like, was it like an example for us to follow? Was that? He says, I have given you an example to follow. Okay, so like what you just did to us, should we do it then to other people? Do as I have done to you. And then I tell you the truth. Slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. So, okay, so you're greater than we are. Clearly, right? You've made a major point of that. You're the Lord and the teacher, and so you're the more important, and you've served us. And so you're saying that since you greater than us served us, then we should serve maybe people that we would be considered above, and of course, people who are considered above us, obviously we have to serve them. That's not even really a choice. And then you also said to wash one another's feet. So that's kind of people who are on a similar level. So you're saying people who were kind of above, people who were kind of below, people who were kind of parallel. So just like, we just serve everybody then? Is that, are we coming close here? Because I'll be honest, it doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Wouldn't have been my first choice, but you made a major point of you're the one with the authority, so I guess this is just what we're doing. And then Jesus ends with, it sometimes gets skipped over, but a wonderful little gem at the end here, where he says, now that you know these things, by the way, God will bless you for doing them. And so it's kind of funny and ironic to me how I maybe especially this series, I've said this a lot, but people even outside of the church who might say they don't really like believe in Jesus or would never go to church or frown on organized religion, that kind of thing, are generally positive toward Jesus. If you say, I'm trying to follow the teachings of Jesus, they say, oh, good, yeah, no, that's wonderful. More people should do that. Sometimes in some ways, I even tried to do that. Well, probably not this one. Because in a world of self-expression, self-promotion, self-love, self-esteem, anything and everything, Jesus repeatedly and explicitly calls his followers to voluntary servanthood, to knowingly and intentionally making yourself a servant of the people around you, and not just the great or the people above you, but really anybody and everything. That really is something kind of radical, isn't it? And from here, the basic thrust of what Jesus has said is pretty clear. It shouldn't really require a lot of explanation. Jesus and then John made sure that we understand very clearly, which I really do appreciate. Here's what we do need to do, though, is to make the decision to step into this and take up the challenge to put ourselves away, put others first, and serve people, and by extension, God. Jesus was better than us, and he served us. And so here is our example and our direct command, and all of our excuses, all stripped away, all three at once. It is, for as clear as it was, it is still possible to misunderstand. And so it is maybe worth noting that Jesus is not saying that in being a servant that you then cannot be a leader in any way or in any fashion. In fact, the world desperately needs servant leaders at any and every position that you can imagine. So he doesn't say to not be a leader, but he certainly does say that if you are in a position of influence or leadership, you're going to use that differently. And it's really addressed very directly, just for the sake of it, in Matthew 20, where Jesus called them, which is the disciples, together and said, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them, right? He doesn't say that if you're one of my followers, you're not going to be a leader, but he does say that among you, it will be different. And here's what's going to be different is whoever wants to be a leader among you. That's not bad, but here's how you're going to do it, is you're going to be a servant. And whoever wants to be first among you, here's what you're going to do, is you're going to become a slave. Because even the Son of Man, right, which is, of course, Jesus referring to himself, came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. So in following Jesus, if you're a leader, here's what you're going to do, is you're going to serve the people who are around and under you. If you're a servant, here's what you're going to do. So of course, you're going to serve the people who you serve, right? Which really is, in fact, not a low position. It's, in fact, the exact appropriate position. Because if you're a leader, you're going to be leading, you're going to be serving the people around you rather than being self-serving. If you're a servant, of course, you're still going to be serving. So it's really kind of like the exact same job, but just from sort of a different position. When I was being ordained into ministry, and it was in a denomination that I promise it's not weird, but most of you have never heard of, so just don't even worry. You can ask me if you care, but don't even worry about it. It won't be interesting. But it was sort of a national thing, and so there were a bunch of us that were all kind of entering into official work or whatever it was in that denomination. And there was a person who was speaking to us, and I think he was actually the president of the denomination. I don't remember for sure because I didn't honestly care that much. But he was somebody who was seen as very, very important. And he gave us a little talk, and he actually spoke from this exact same instance of John 13 with Jesus washing people's feet. And what he said was not congratulations on your personal achievement. He didn't say, welcome to a new status level. Welcome to now the place where you have respect and you can take it easy. He gave each one of us a towel with the denomination logo emblazoned on it. And he said, welcome to the order of the towel. I bet you like that, don't you? I'll bet you like that pastors and ministry leaders are being brought up to use their position and their influence to serve the people around them rather than be self-serving. I'll bet you're a big fan of that. Well, what's the difference between a pastor and you as a follower of Jesus? Title and role? It's not really that different. And so, follower of Jesus, welcome to the order of the towel. Before we're done, though, I think this is interesting. Remember how Jesus ended after he washed the feet. He said, now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. That priceless gem buried at the bottom of the pile there that gets overlooked is that by serving people rather than yourselves, not only do the people who you serve win, but you also win by being how God created you to be. This is, in fact, a concept that is repeated and kind of overwhelming in the Bible, and specifically in the teachings of Jesus. In fact, I try to talk about it on a somewhat regular basis, but hopefully not too much to where people like kind of start to tune it out and like, all right, yeah, I get this, I've heard about this. But this is, in fact, how God has created you to live and to find your best life, is the life that God has created you for, is where you find the greatest joy and satisfaction, is living as He instructs, where then not only is He glorified as His creation lives and functions as He's designed them to, but you grow in joy and in love for Him as you experience how good this is. I think it's often very, very oversimplified when people call the Bible like God's instruction book or something to that effect. I think there's a lot more nuance to some things than that. But in this instance, with this teaching, I just have this amazing picture in my head that I hope I can show you of somebody who maybe has been going through life and is kind of frustrated or disappointed. Maybe they've spent a lot of time and worked really hard to try and gain and achieve and just haven't really done that well, and they're frustrated, or maybe even they've experienced a good deal of what we might consider success. And so they're there and they're saying, okay, so I've done this, like everything that I feel like I was supposed to do, right? I've achieved and I've acquired, and I have a nice home, and I have a beautiful family, and I have respect in the community, and I'm headed toward a comfortable retirement. Like, everything's good. This is all that this is everything that I was supposed to do, right? But somehow it just still doesn't seem like this is really quite what it should be. It seems like there's something that's very, very important that's been missing here. What's going on? And so I have this image in my head of, this is like when you go to IKEA and you buy something and you bring it home, bookshelf or whatever, and you take out all the pieces, and there they are, and you say, okay, well, I mean, this is pretty obvious. This is the piece that goes on the top here, so that'll be this, and now here, these are going to be the supports, so they're going to go here, and this is obviously going to fit in here. This all makes sense, and you're feeling pretty good about yourself. You're making good progress. You don't even look at the instructions, because you all know that's bonus points if you put it together without looking at the instructions. That's kind of really the goal and the challenge, and so it's going really well, and you're really confident in how things are until you get about 80% of the way through. Now you're looking and, okay, but this is missing, like, this isn't going to hold up. You're going to put like 2 books on this shelf, it's going to all fall apart. There's something that's really wrong. And so you go back and you look through and think through everything you did. And you're like, okay, so, right, so this was going to go here, and that's got to be right. And these are going to go here, and that's, like, this all makes sense. No, this is all right. I did this all right. I'm sure I did. But you're still in the same place. And so you're about to call customer service because you know that it's defective, or they left out a couple of really vital pieces or something. But before you do, you want to have your ducks in a row, and so you go dig through the garbage, you find the instructions, you pull them out, just because you want to be able to know what you're talking about for sure, and you say, oh, there it is. I did this whole thing backwards. I thought this was the bottom, this is the top. Now I understand. I feel like that is how we should feel when or for the first time you really see or experience or are able to enact what Jesus says actually repeated in all four Gospels, but just for today, here's from Matthew 10. If you refuse to take up your cross and follow me, you're not worthy of being mine. What does that mean? I don't know. I would actually really love to know what the disciples thought he meant by take up your cross when they're hearing that in real time, because probably for sure they didn't think that he meant actual crucifixion, but Jesus explains. He says, because if you cling to your life, you will lose it. But that's completely backwards. How do I lose? If I lose it by clinging to it, then how do I possibly find my life? It says, well, but if you give up your life for me, then you find it. And this, I feel like, is where we should all say, oh, I get it now. I've been trying to build this thing completely backwards, and it seemed like it made sense. It seemed like it was so obvious and so intuitive, but I had the piece that was supposed to go on the top on the bottom, and the piece that's supposed to go on the bottom is on the top. Now I get it. Now this works. Now, since you know these things, God will bless you if you do them. If you cling to your life, you lose it, but if you give up your life for me, you will find it. It's not a punishment. It's not God wanting you to be so miserable so that he can see just how much you really believe. This is how you're created and designed to be. It looks kind of backwards. It sounds kind of backwards, but your greatest joy and fulfillment are going to come in serving God and people. It's true, and it really works. And so it's amazing to me how we said that our society celebrates and values maybe above everything else being your own person, right? Or maybe that's like the highest virtue or value that we can have. I'm going to go here and do this and make this decision because you know what? That's who I am. And the irony is that we step into and discover who we are as individuals by giving ourselves up, by becoming servants of something bigger and greater than ourselves as individuals. This is how you were designed to be, not to be your own greatest good, but to find your greatest good in a good that is greater than yourself. The decision to put yourself beneath is in fact the decision to actualize yourself. And how gracious is our God, that he gives us not only the clear and repeated instruction and example on how to do this, but that for at least most people in a room like this, he gives you the opportunity to voluntarily choose it. Listen, if you're here and you're a servant and that's just your lot in life, you can still get in on this. You can, instead of serving out of drudgery and just that you don't have any option, you can step into this and serve with joy and purpose, and that will be a huge benefit. But for those of us who have the option to choose to put ourselves beneath in service and love to God and others, that's the standalone choice that most people would never make. Because the opportunity to freely choose servanthood is really, isn't it even so much greater than when it's not your choice? The choice to follow the teaching and example of Jesus when most people wouldn't gives you the opportunity to experience what most people won't. Take up your towel, fill your basin with water, go do something to serve somebody else, and tomorrow do something else. And there are 100 places to serve in the church. I hope you do that, but I hope you do it even more the other 6 days a week, and not because you have to, because you get to. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much that you tell us and show us so often so many things that really ought to be obvious and that we should be able to figure out on our own, and that sometimes it's things that we would never figure out on our own. Thank you for giving us clearly and repeatedly the key to unlocking the life that you have for us and the people that you've created us to be, not by seeking to serve ourselves or advance ourselves, but to serve you and to serve the other people that you have put in our lives around us. Still praying if you're here and maybe you've never taken the first step to become a real follower of Jesus. Listen, it's as simple as can be. Every one of us, that we have sin in our lives. There's things that have been wrong. We knew they were wrong. We did them anyway. And now what can a human being possibly do to satisfy justice to the God that created us in the first place? Of course, there could be nothing, but that is why Jesus came and lived a sinless life, died in our place, and that was him absorbing justice and taking the just punishment for our sins. We take his righteousness, he takes our sinfulness, and we become forgiven, adopted children of God and his family forever. If that's you, just right where you sit, you can just pray, say to God out loud, or even just in your heart, and he'll hear you. Say, God, I believe that Jesus Christ came and died and resurrected so that I could be forgiven and be adopted as a child in your family. Please come into my life. Forgive me and adopt me. Begin to make me into the person you created me to be. And give me the life that you have for me. If you've never prayed a prayer like that before, it's not the words or the prayer that saves you. It's God's grace that comes to you. Through your faith in him, you are a new spiritual creation in Jesus Christ. The next best thing you can do is to not live your new life in Jesus by yourself. Let somebody know. You can go out to the point. That's just the corner in the lobby. Let the person there know the decision you've made. They'll take your information. We'll be able to follow up with you for some good next steps. If you're online, send us a message. It's the same. For those of us who we've been following Jesus maybe for a long time, maybe we've heard messages like this and seen these teachings of Jesus 100 times, heard the story of Jesus washing the feet 1,000 times. I know there's nothing new that's being put into your Bibles. That's in fact good news. Don't be frustrated by that. But we will always and forever have a next step to take in discovering ourselves by giving ourselves up for Jesus Christ and the people around us. What is it that you can do? Will you just commit right now between yourself and the Spirit of God to take that step that he has for you, to actualize yourself by being the servant who he has created you to be? It is not a low position. It is the exact appropriate position for every one of us as created human beings who have the opportunity to live in service of the God of the universe. Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to live that life that you have for us. And it's so difficult for us as self-centered people, but we ask by your Spirit you would give us the strength and the courage and the follow-through to see the opportunities to serve, to step into those and take those and be who you've created us to be for your glory in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Hey,